If I said the word splash zones to you, most of you would immediately know what I'm talking about. Some of you in the front row are referring to when I get going on a sermon, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about SeaWorld. You know, when you go over to SeaWorld and you are able to get in that area and some of the different tanks or some of the events, and you get close enough where you can get wet. A bunch of years ago, SeaWorld, first of all, is one of our favorite places. Certainly we love to go there and probably gone there almost every other year for quite a few years. But quite a few years ago, we had gone to SeaWorld, and this was back in the day when Crystal was more or less his age, and the kids kind of wanted to be in that splash zone, so we were bold enough to be able to say we can do it. And I have a picture now. I need to warn you that the imagery might be disturbing. But let's show that first picture. Oh, you maybe can't see it. I had to take it on my iPhone because my scanner wouldn't work this morning. But this is those moments where you take pictures, you're never in it, and you're thinking, thank goodness. Because this is a pleasant picture. If I'd have been in it, it might have been a little different. But we were all excited because we were at the whale show and we were sitting there. We didn't go to the end, but we thought, let's get down there. Let's see if this really can get wet like it says it can. One of the first times I think we went at the SeaWorld. Well, the event started, as you know, and the whales went around. And this is the shot after the event. I couldn't get the third person to agree to the photo, so I had to cover it. But we were all wet. In fact, let me advise you something. If you ever go on a vacation and you have to fly home, go to SeaWorld the day before, not the day you fly home. Because by the time we got back, my belt buckle was rusted, my wife's earrings were all rusted, and we walked the whole day with with salty water on us and stuff. But it was one of those things where basically we got soaked. We're starting this series called Margin. And margin is defined as an amount allowed or available beyond what is necessary. Margin is, as an example, is the space between the dry seats and the edge of the tank. It's something that, you might sit there and think, well, we just finished a series on empty, so how is that different than maybe what we had done before? Well, empty is looking at life from the edge of the tank and realizing that, you know what, we better get back because we're too close. We've gone too far to the edge and we risk getting hurt. And granted, we can be like the race car and, it seems fast and fun, but we run the risk at any moment of spinning out or any moment of getting wet. And so we look at life from the end of being too far in. Margins, on the other hand, now that we talked about that, and we talked these last several weeks about being too familiar and too busy and too entertained and said we need to back off. Now in margins, we look back from a safe place, the safe seats, and say how close can we get and yet still be safe? Where's kind of that boundary, that line we can go to and not risk hurting ourselves or risk falling over the edge or being in a place of danger that's going to cause us harm? What's interesting about margin and margins is that there's always a positive impact that it has on us. And maybe we don't realize it. For those who love to read, nowadays it's less and less maybe, but when we read or even when we look at a picture, they have margins on them. And when you have a book that's neatly organized with some space, it's comfortable. But if you've ever read like a letter where they used every available spot, it's almost, you get kind of anxious and frustrated because it's like, oh man, it's just really busy. And then sitting in the dry seats, I can still remember being in there thinking, okay, is this the moment? He's going by, oh, no, we're okay. Oh, is this the moment? Oh, we're okay. And then it happens. You can't relax because you can't just watch the show because you're always thinking about there's a moment here where we're probably going to get wet based on the area that we're seating. Maybe the most obvious place when we think about how margins have a positive impact is when we drive down the road. We all know the little white line on the shoulder that tells us, look, if you stay on this side, go as fast as you want because the edge of this road ain't going to hurt you. But if you get over that edge and you get into the margin on the side of the road, you run the risk of going over the edge and losing control of your car and getting hurt. And so when we stay within the safety of those margins, we find ourselves relaxed and free. I mean, I've said it before. That's why people driving this way at 65 miles an hour don't freak us out. Because if they stay on their side and we stay on ours and we all live within our margin, everybody's going to be happy. And if you don't think it impacts you, how many of you have driven in this valley fog? Huh? You could drive down a country road perfectly fine one day, but when the fog sets in, what's it like? I mean, you can't see, you don't have the margin between you and the car in front of you, so you're thinking, you're intensely looking for a red light somewhere. Or you don't have it on this side, so you're thinking, is there anybody coming? I don't know, is there passing? And then on this side, you don't even know. You're just listening and feeling for the bumpiness of the edge of the road. And so it's a stressful time when you're living or when you're driving down the road with that kind of a lack of margin. Well, life itself is meant to have margins. And we're going to spend the next 4 weeks talking about what God's designed for these margins in our life. To look at, major areas. We're going to look at scheduling. We're going to look at finances. We're going to look at moral character and how it protects us in the areas of temptation. The Bible talks about these areas that if we're able to live within the margin, we can live free. We can live full. We can live with purpose. We can live according to what God's will is and experience all the pleasures and the joys of what God intends for us. But if we go over them, if we live towards the edge, today it might be fine, might be exhilarating, it might be and all the excitement that goes with it, but in the reality it's like driving in the fog. And at any time we can get in an accident and get hurt. Today what I wanted to focus on was the benefit of margin, really what the need for margin is. I mean, every one of us can say, my life is good, do I really need it? Well, Christ tells us we do. And so turn with me, if you'd like to Matthew 11. In Matthew 11, Jesus was speaking to people in the splash zone. He was speaking to people who were in a place where they were tense and anxious, and maybe they weren't there by choice, maybe they were by force, because he was speaking to people who were experiencing this huge burden in life. That they were having the pressure and the burden of the Roman rule that was taxing them and setting all of these regulations in their life, and they were being suppressed by the authorities above them. He was speaking to the people who were experiencing the religious burdens of the Pharisees that were setting all of these rules about how to live so that you don't sin, and constantly going around and picking apart what they're doing right or what they're doing wrong, and they know they're failing, and they're anxious. And they're burdened, and they're weary, and they're feeling the effects of a life that just doesn't have any kind of a margin in it. And so let's take a look at what Jesus has to say to them, and then we're going to kind of touch on a little bit how that affects our own life. In chapter 11, Matthew 11, Jesus, as I had said, he just got done actually talking about some cities where really he was speaking against the religious leaders and against the people who were really imposing such burden on the people, the leaders who are imposing burden on the people. And he just really kind of came down on them. And now he's looking out at the people. He's looking out at those who are just soaked with all that life has thrown at them and all that they face. And so this is what he says in chapter 11, starting at verse 25. Is at that time Jesus said, this after he just got done talking about against these unrepentant cities, is what the title of the other section says. Is at that time Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven. I'm starting at verse 25. Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. And then it says in verse 28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Jesus is really describing here a moment where he's looking at the signs and the people. He's seeing the faces of these people who are without margin. And again, some by choice, some by force, but they're living life so much to the extreme that they are wore out.